Okay, you are the person.
Functioning inhalation anesthesia. Which slide is that? You're going to be using like this cutting to tap it. The button stopped working. Like the lower button is not working. It's not moving, Ivory. So we are talking about inhalation of anesthetics. First, we are going to see the properties of the ideal inhalation anesthetic agent, right? First, we are going to talk about the properties of the ideal inhalation anesthetic agent. Should have a pleasant odor and non-irritant to the respiratory tract, like the inhalation anesthetic agent. It should have, these are properties of an ideal inhalation anesthetic agent. Should have a pleasant odor and non-irritant to the respiratory tract. So it should be pleasant and rapid induction of anesthesia. Then should possess a low blood stroke gas solubility, which will enable it to permit rapid induction and rapid recovery. Should be chemically stable in storage and non-interact with anesthetic circuit material or with soda lime. These agents should not be flammable, nor explosive. They should be capable of producing hypoxia and analgesia, and they should be capable of producing hypoxia with analgesia and probably some degree of muscle relaxation. Okay. They should be capable of producing hypnosis with analgesia and probably some degree of muscle relaxation. Continuation, these agents should be sufficiently potent to allow the use of high, what is FI? High, that's FiO2. Sorry? We talked about oxygen. This FI. Okay. Should be sufficiently potent to allow the use of high oxygen when necessary. Okay. Should not be metabolized in the body. Should not be non-toxic, nor provoke allergic reactions. So this agent should not be metabolized in the body. Once it is given to you, it has to be released out like after the process, right? Maybe you can. Okay. Should produce minimal CVS and respiratory system depression and should not interact with other drugs used commonly during anesthesia, e.g., pressor agents or catecholamines. Should be completely inert and eliminated completely and rapidly in an unchanged form via the lungs. So once it is inhaled, shouldn't be metabolized in the body and should be completely inert and eliminated completely and rapidly in an unchanged form, like the way it was given to you via the lungs, right? Should be easy to administer using standard vaporizers. Then should not be epileptogenic or raise the ICP, the intracranial pressure. So these agents, once they raise the intracranial pressure, they are not the ideal drugs to be given during inhalation. So we are going to talk about the minimum alveolar concentration, which is the MAC. The alveolar concentration in brackets of inhalation agent that prevents movement in response to a standardized stimulus in 50% of patients, bracket, surgical incision. So the MAC, which is the alveolar concentration, bracket, inhalation agent that prevents movement in response to a standardized stimulus in 50% of patients that let's have had surgical procedures. It is related to the inhalation. It is related to the inhalation of drugs partial pressure in the brain rather than its percentage concentration in alveoli. It is an index of anesthetic potency. So it's generally given a 0.5 mark of one agent in combination with 0.5 mark of another approximates to 1 mark in total. So they give 0.5 mark of that one agent in combination, like to that they are supposed to give. Then they add another 0.5 mark of another approximate they are supposed to give. So in total, it will be 1 mark that is given. So 1.3 mark prevents movement in 95% of patients. When it goes beyond 1, and they give 1.3, it prevents movement in 95% of patients. 0.3 to 0.4 mark is associated with awakening. So once it goes on reducing and treated to 0.3 to 0.4 is associated with awakening. So the person might wake up during the surgical procedure. So MAC to prevent awareness stroke cause nausea. There is a 6% decrease in MAC per decade of age. Infants require increased MAC and elderly patients require a decreased MAC. So in elder patients, they have to reduce the MAC they give. Then in infants, it is a bit raised. So what are the factors that lead to a reduction in MAC? These are the factors we're going to talk about. So factors which lead to a reduction in MAC. Sedative drugs. So, there are people who always take these sedatives, like drug abuse or something like that. So if you find this patient has been taking sedative drugs, you have to do a reduction in MAC during an anesthetic procedure. Are you getting me, guys? Then also another factor that leads to its reduction is increasing age, like in the elderly. We've seen in the elderly the MAC has to be reduced. Higher atmospheric pressure in bracket anesthetic potency is related to partial pressure or higher atmospheric pressures. Once there is high atmospheric pressure, there has to be a less MAC. Then also in hypotension, in hyperthermia, like where there's decreased metabolic rate, then in hypocapnia, in In myxedema, where there's also a decreased metabolic rate, then in pregnancy, also in acute alcohol intoxication. All these are factors that lead to reduction in MAF. So factors that lead to the increase. We have decreasing age, like the infants. In case there is fever, so you have to increase the MAF. In induced sympathoadrenal stimulation, again hypercapnia. The presence of ephedrine or amphetamine in thyrotoxicosis, where there is an increase in the metabolic rate, chronic alcohol ingestion, all these factors lead to its increase. So, pharmacokinetics. Therapeutic tissue concentration in the CNS depends on absorption from alveoli, then distribution in the body, elimination by the lungs, or metabolism. So these are therapeutic tissue concentration in the CNS that depend on, like the CNS depends on what? On these for therapeutic tissue concentration. Better. It depends on the uptake, in bracket absorption from the alveoli, the distribution in the body, and elimination by the lungs or metabolism. So there's a diagram there that shows from uptake. From the machine, you're seeing how much the person will breathe in, right? How much the person will take in. So the breathing circuit, you can see that. Then the distribution to the body, like how far it has gone, has it gone to all the required parts of the body? Then elimination by the lungs or metabolism, where the lungs will eliminate afterwards. So pharmacokinetics. Induction and maintenance of anesthesia with inhalation agents depends on brain concentration of agent. Induction and maintenance of anesthesia with inhalation agents depends on brain concentration of the agent. So when the brain takes in enough, but I said when the brain takes in enough, like if the concentration in the brain is too much. Can you talk about that here? Come on, let's go. So, it requires equilibration of alveoli, which is the PM, then arterial and brain. So now let us first take this. This first statement is taken as PPR, like the induction and maintenance of anesthesia with inhalation drugs depend on the brain concentration of the agent, that is PPR. Then requires equilibration of alveoli, which is PA, that is taken as PA. Then arterial, which is P small a, and the brain, which is taken as PPR. So PPR pressures. So concentrations, which is the concentration is percent of the agent. So I think this one is some sort of, could be like of a calculation, I don't know. So in exercise like what the brain concentration, like how much the brain concentration will lead. So the alveolar concentration is dependent on the inspired concentration. So the Fi we are saying is the inspired concentration of oxygen. Remember there's another Fi. So alveolar concentration is dependent on the inspired concentration, the ventilation, and the uptake by the arterial blood. So we are going to talk about the inspired concentration. First, this Fi is dependent on the fresh gas flow rate, whereby an increase in the flow rate will lead to a high inspired concentration. Then the volume, it also depends on the volume of the breathing circuit, whereby a small circuit volume also leads to a high inspired concentration. Any absorption, it also depends on any absorption by the machine, stroke soda lime, or the breathing circuit. So these are the three factors that the inspired concentration depends on. So continuation of pharmacokinetics, we're going to talk about the uptake by the arterial blood. So what does uptake of arterial blood depend on? It depends on the solubility in the blood, in bracket partition coefficients, whereby there's N2O, nitrogen oxide dioxide. N2O is nitrogen dioxide. Yes, because nitrogen oxide doesn't have the two in between. It's what? Nitrous oxide. So the uptake by arterial blood is dependent on the solubility in the blood. And this here shows like dependent on the like what is more soluble than the other on these agents. Then it also depends on the cardiac output, bracket alveolar blood flow. Increase what? Increase cardiac output. Increase in cardiac output will lead to faster alveolar blood flow, therefore faster uptake and then slow induction. So it will also depend on the alveolar to venous partial pressures gradient, right? So we are going to talk about solubility in blood. We're talking more about solubility. At first, we talked about yeah.
Yes, for people. Okay, it's safe. Don't worry. When they say alveolar to venous partial pressure gradient, these things are being absorbed due to passive diffusion, you know. So they diffuse from high concentration to low concentration. So as you're initiating the anesthetic drug, that means it will be more higher concentration in the alveolar than in the bloodstream. So their diffusion will be fast. But as time goes on, their partial pressure in blood will also increase. You get me? So when it increases, that means you have also to increase the concentration in the alveolar so that the diffusion continues. That's why we are saying their uptake depends on that partial pressure gradient. So if it is huge, they will diffuse faster. When they are in nearly reaching equilibrium, you have to increase what you're giving in so that it can be absorbed. Okay.
Solubility in blood, partition coefficients, the ratio of the concentration of anesthetic gas, but by the way, let's use an example. When you increase the fire rate to increase it, gas coming off is slow more than when you just reduce the fire when you're cooking. It is, no, that's the truth for sure. When you reduce, you're using more gas than when there's heat that is coming out from. Yes. It's on. There's an explanation here about the cardiac output. It is saying a high cardiac output will tend to maintain a concentration gradient between the alveolus and the pulmonary blood, so that what's this? What's PF? Eh. So a high cardiac output will tend to maintain a concentration gradient between the alveolus and the pulmonary blood, so that the partial pressures in the alveoli rises slowly. So conversely, a low cardiac output favors a more rapid equilibration, and so onset of anesthesia will also be more rapid. However, modern anesthetic agents, which are relatively insoluble in blood, are affected to a much lesser extent by cardiac output when compared with agents of greater blood solubility. A high cardiac output will tend to maintain a concentration gradient between the alveolus and the pulmonary blood, so that the partial pressure of the alveoli they rise slowly. Get it? So conversely, a low cardiac output favors a more rapid equilibrium, and so onset of anesthetic will also be more rapid. Okay. And the cardiac output is slow, like it's slow. Eh? It favors more rapid equilibration. Hmm? So when it's high, that means the reverse is true. When it's low, the onset of anesthetic will be more rapid. When it's high, it becomes slow. That talks about the slow induction. The high part. Ah, it says a high cardiac output will tend to maintain a concentration gradient between the alveolus, like it maintains a concentration gradient between the alveolus and the pulmonary blood. So at the partial pressures of the alveolus, like they slow down, like they are rising slows. Yes. Mm. Yeah. That's how I'm understanding. I don't know, but that's how I was understanding it. No, like I don't know. It's like for them, they are explaining it according to how it is going. Like, high will lead to the concentration being. Eh? So, Erin has covered my what? Erin, you've covered my slides. He's reading for. You just send that part in the group, like. Phew. We talked about it. was going to more about the subject, but they had a different question. That's why we explained it.
Yes, in the blood. When alveolar ventilation, increased alveolar ventilation results in faster rise in the pressure, partial pressure in the alveoli of the anesthetic. Yes. To increase ventilation, alveolar ventilation results in faster rise. Do you with me? Consequently, the partial pressure in the brain increases more rapidly, and so the onset of anesthesia is faster. So I think this is a direct relationship. When you increase alveolar ventilation, there's increase in partial pressure of the anesthetic in the alveolar and increase also in the brain. So this is a direct in normal circumstances. Now, inspired concentration. A high inspired concentration leads to a rapid rise in partial pressure in the alveoli, and so onset of anesthesia is also rapid. So this is also a direct relationship. If you increase the concentration inspired, it will also increase the partial pressure. Now, cardiac output is an indirect relationship. You understand? Right? Alveolar ventilation. Yes. Yes. Now, that means high cardiac output, low equilibrium, and so a high cardiac output will tend to maintain a concentration gradient between the alveolus and the pulmonary blood. So the partial pressure in the alveoli rises slowly. Am I correct? The alveolus. Yes, because the concept of anesthesia is rapid. Once the concentration is high. Now, cardiac output, a high cardiac output will tend to maintain a concentration gradient between the alveolus and the pulmonary blood.
Concentration gradient.
Yes.
That means that the blood supply and the other so they can't cross
Okay. So the partial pressure of the alveoli rises slowly.
Actually, in the next slides, we talk about the solubility and the cardiac output. Maybe to give a better summary. Obviously, that's how you are going.
Vice versa. A low cardiac output equals a more rapid equilibration. So onset of anesthesia will also be more rapid. Slower. Yes, so the equilibrium can be maintained.
actually being able, that means the cardiac person forward in a peaceful state. But if one is facing how to person, you understand in that part of the hospital, like the participant is very in partial pressure, in concentration.
So when you type cardiac output, are you type cardiac output, we have like faster flow. So the equilibrium will take longer before you understand that.
They say that when you
Yeah.
like the blood is
So there's no yes.
because the blood supply is being very fast. But if it is slow, it's actually giving off to the brain.
So there's time for diffusion for form, which means red.
Everyone is talking about, I don't know. Okay. We are talking about solubility in blood. I have the part of partial pressure difference. So, solubility in blood, partition coefficients, the ratio of concentration of anesthetic gas in each of two phases at equilibrium. So can you collide? When you're not I'll ask you more questions, but you're not paying attention. Okay. Partition coefficients. The ratio of the concentration of anesthetic gas in two of the phases at equilibrium in bracket equal partial.
Have the same one. So we stop it. Cardiac output. This is how cardiac output affects the sharp in alveolar blood and brain. Now, changes in pulmonary blood flow have obvious effects on the uptake of anesthetic gases from the alveolar space. An increase in pulmonary blood flow will increase the uptake of anesthetic. Yes. Will increase the uptake of anesthetic. That means increasing the partial pressure in the blood. Now, an increase in cardiac output and pulmonary blood flow will increase uptake of anesthetic into the blood. But the anesthetic taken off will be distributed to all tissues, not just the CNS, because of the increased cardiac output. Now, cerebral blood flow is well regulated, and the increased cardiac output will therefore increase delivery of anesthetic to other tissues and not the brain.
But other like body organs, like when you have increased cardiac output, you also get increased supply of blood. But since like this is an anesthetic agent that's supposed to be reaching the brain, right? But you have increased cardiac output, so other body organs also receive that anesthetic agent. But since you have like a moderate blood supply that is supposed to reach the brain, okay? Like, okay, let me start from the basics. When we have increased cardiac output, all other body systems will therefore have increased like supply of blood. But the brain will have its lower supply of blood, right? But since like now in this situation we're also having the anesthetic agent is supposed to be reaching the brain. But since there is more blood reaching other organs than there is reaching the brain, you understand me? The anesthetic agent will reach other body organs, like more concentration of the anesthetic agent will reach other body organs than it will reach the brain. Okay. So therefore you will have a slower induction of anesthesia because there is less anesthetic agent reaching there. I don't know if I'm trying to explain.
So trying to finish the solubility in blood. I've understood it. No, here I just saying the higher the blood gas coefficients of inhalation agent, the greater the solubility in blood, the greater its uptake by pulmonary circulation. Alveolar partial pressures rises more slowly, then induction is prolonged. Then you've all understood the cardiac output. So I can skip that, right? Can I? Up to excretion. Oh, okay. So factors affecting elimination. First, we're going to talk about the elimination. Now we have exhalation. Is the most important. So, exhalation is the most important. Biotransformation, hepatic cytochrome P450 enzymes. Then there's transcutaneous loss, which is insignificant in elimination. So factors that speed recovery, we have elimination of rebreathing, high fresh gas flows, low anesthetic circuit volume, low absorption by anesthetic circuit, then decreased solubility, high cerebral blood flow. These guys are telling me you've talked about everything, so we're on 58, the factors affecting elimination. We've talked about the elimination where exhalation is most important. Where we find biotransformation, like in hepatic cytochrome, like biotransformation, hepatic cytochrome P450 enzymes. Also transcutaneous loss, which is insignificant. So factors that speed recovery, you have elimination of rebreathing, high fresh gas flows, low anesthetic circuit volume, low absorption by anesthetic circuit, decreased solubility, high cerebral blood flow, and increased ventilation, also length of time. So these are the factors that speed recovery. So you're going to talk about the pharmacodynamics. In general anesthesia, we have whereby is pharmacological reversible loss of consciousness. General anesthesia is pharmacologically reversible loss of consciousness. So it involves analgesia, amnesia, some degree of muscle relaxation, and a reflexia. All inhalation agents share a common mechanism of action at molecular level. All inhalation agents share a common mechanism of action at molecular level. A drug's anesthetic potency correlates with its lipid solubility. So mode of action of inhalation agents, we have over how much a drug can yeah, that's what I think. So mode of action of inhalation agents. Activate potassium channels, block sodium channels, disrupt membrane lipids in neuron cells. In general, all general anesthetics increase the cellular threshold for firing, thus decreasing neuronal activity. Also may interact with GABA receptor, the glycerin receptor and alpha-1, glycerin receptor alpha-1 subunit, nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, and the NMDA receptors. So they are showing modern inhalation anesthetic agents. We have the nitrous oxide, halothane, influorine, isoflurane, sevoflurane, and desflurane. So we are going to talk about the halothane. Repolarization. Depolarize. Yeah? Yes. So halothane. The mark of halothane in oxygen is approximate. Oh. It is a halogenated alkane. Halothane is halogenated alkane colorless liquid with pleasant, stroke sweet smell, decomposed by light, stored in amber-colored bottles, rendered stable by addition of 0.01% thymo, corrodes metals in vaporizers, it reacts with aluminium and lead, large stroke gas solubility coefficients of 2.4, where it's highest of all. It is the highest of all the modern agents. So I think it's the highest of all the modern agents in solubility. That's all. Okay. The mark of halotene in oxygen is approximately 1.1% in the neonate, 0.95 in the infant, 0.9 at 1 to 2 years, then 0.75 at 40, and 0.65 at 8 years. It has slower induction and recovery times than other agents. I think the slower the induction, the more they are found highly soluble in blood. Approximately 20% of halotene is metabolized in the liver. The major metabolites are bromine, chlorine, trifluoroacetic acid, and trifluoroacetylethanoamine. So serious effects of halotene causes direct myocardial depression. So the dose-dependent reduction of blood pressure, heart rate, and cardiac output. Atropine is administered to antagonize bradycardia. Myocardial oxygen demand is reduced to reduced HR and anti-HR and contractility. So little effect on systemic vascular resistance. Dilates the coronary arteries, but coronary blood flow is decreased due to decrease in systemic blood pressure. Arrhythmias are more common with halotene than with any other agents. So, it induces cardiac arrhythmias in the presence of increased carbon dioxide, decreased oxygen, or increased circulating catecholamines. Infiltration of local anesthetic solutions containing epinephrine. Endosurgical patients are particularly prone. So to reduce arrhythmias, avoid decrease in oxygen saturation and increase in carbon dioxide. Avoid epinephrine concentrations of greater than 1, the ratio of 100,000. Avoid a dosage in adults of greater than 10 mL of 1 to a ratio of 100,000. Epinephrine in 10 minutes, i.e. 100 micrograms or 30 milligrams per hour, which equals 300 micrograms. So respiratory effects. It's non-irritant to the airway, pleasant to breathe during induction of anesthesia, rapid and shallow breathing, whereby there is increase in respiratory rate and decrease in ventilation. So alveolar ventilation decreases carbon dioxide partial pressure. The ratio of alveolar concentration to the ratio of alveolar concentration decreased to the ratio of carbon dioxide partial pressure increases as the depth of halotene anesthesia increases. A potent bronchodilator reverses asthma-induced bronchospasm, inhibits salivary and bronchial secretions, depresses clearance of mucus, promoting post-op hypoxia and atelectasis. So, cerebrum in the cerebral side. So it brings about dilating cerebral vessels, whereby there is cerebrovascular resistance, which is decreased. Therefore, increase in cerebrospinal. Okay? So what is CBF? Cerebral blood flow increases. Blunt autoregulation. It's not recording, it's just going like that. No. So other people can see them on YouTube. Okay. So there's blunt autoregulation, in bracket, the maintenance of constant cerebral blood flow during changes in arterial blood pressure. So increase in the ratio of, is this a ratio or they're just saying increase in intracranial pressure? It's just increase in intracranial pressure prevented by hyperventilation prior to administration of halothane. Metabolic oxygen requirement will be decreased in the cerebrum. So in neuromuscular, there are relaxes skeletal muscles, potentiates non-depolarizing relaxants. Post-op shivering is common, which increases oxygen requirements, resulting in hypoxemia. A triggering agent of malignant hyperthermia. So this is a triggering agent of malignant hyperthermia. Can tell someone and they have high fevers, right? When people get high fevers and they're given halothane. Like something. Which are those? So when they say malignant hyperthermia, it's like cancer. Okay. In the uterus, halothane relaxes uterine muscle and may cause postpartum hemorrhage. So use less or equal to 0.5% concentration. Halothane associated hepatic dysfunction. So halothane associated hepatic dysfunction, two types. We have the mild transit rearrangement of liver function tests and the immunologic form of hepatic dysfunction, bracket halothane hepatitis, with severe jaundice progressing to fulminating hepatic necrosis, usually due to repeated exposure to the drug. Mortality is 30 to 70%. Avoid repeat exposure within 3 months if possible. Extremely rare incident is 1 to 35,000. So contraindications of halothane, we have intracranial mass lesion. In case there is intracranial mass lesion, hypovolemia, severe cardiac disease, unexplained liver dysfunction following previous exposure, no evidence associating halothane with worsening of pre-existing liver disease. So all these are contraindications. When there's intracranial mass lesions, hypovolemia, severe cardiac disease, unexplained liver dysfunction following previous exposure, when there's no evidence associated with halothane with worsening of pre-existing liver disease. So drug interactions. Myocardial depression is exacerbated by beta blockers. Then 20% patients have arrhythmias with epinephrine, which is S-strokes. Serious ventricular arrhythmias with aminophylline. So another drug is isoflurane, which is a methyl ether. It is colorless and volatile liquid, has a pungent ether-like odor, a chemical isomer of influrane. So this is outdated. It is stable, does not react with metal or other substances. It does not require preservatives. It is non-flammable in clinical concentrations. So its mark is 1.15% in oxygen and 0.56%, 70% nitrous oxide. Has a decreased blood stroke gas solubility of 1.4 and thus alveolar concentrations equilibrate rapidly with inspired concentrations, therefore rapid recovery. Its pungent smell causes coughing and breath holding during induction, not ideal for induction. Undergoes minimal metabolism in body, 0.17% to form formic acid and chloride. The minimal metabolism renders hepatic and renal toxicity unlike. So its effects in cardiovascular, it causes minimal cardiac depression, causes hypotension because of reduction in the SVR. What is this? Causes hypertension because of reduction in systolic ventricular rate. Systemic vascular resistance. Okay. Arrhythmias are uncommon. Little sensitization of the myocardium to catecholamines causes coronary vasodilatation, therefore coronary steal syndrome or drop in perfusion pressure. Regional myocardial ischemia avoided in patients with coronary artery disease. So in respiratory, it causes dose-dependent respiratory depression with increase in the ventilation and increase in respiratory rate. Lungs, the normal ventilatory response to hypoxia and hypercapnia, irritant to the upper airway. It is a good bronchodilator. So in neuromuscular, it relaxes skeletal muscles, potentiates non-depolarizing NMB drugs. In cerebral, it decreases concentration. Decreased concentrations do not cause any change in cerebral blood flow at normal capnia. Hence, it is superior to halothane. Cerebral metabolic oxygen requirement is decreased. Then there is higher inspired concentration, which causes cerebral vasodilatation and increase in cerebral blood flow. It is contraindicated with severe hypovolemia. Then drug interactions, we have ventricular ectopics seen in 20% of patients receiving. You said SC was? So, ventricular ectopics, the drug interactions, ventricular ectopics seen in 20% of patients receiving subcutaneous infiltration with epinephrine, 6 microgram per kg, potentiates non-depolarizing NMBAs. So we have another drug, We have sevoflurane, which is a methyl sevo. It is a methylpropyl ether, non-flammable, non-irritant to upper respiratory tract, non-pungent. It has a pleasant smell. It is stable and is stored in amber-colored bottles like the above. Yes. Then, in the presence of water, it undergoes some hydrolysis. This happens also with soda lime. It is relatively expensive, has a decreased blood-gas partition coefficient of 0.65. The rate of equilibration between alveoli and inspired concentration is faster than for halothane or isoflurane. So when its blood gas partition coefficient is closer to that of desflurane, which is 0.42, and nitrous 0.44. Smooth and rapid inhalation induction has higher partition coefficients in vessel-rich tissues, muscles, and fat than for desflurane. Therefore, the rate of recovery is lower than that after desflurane anesthesia. Mark in adults is 1.8% in oxygen and 0.66% in 60% of nitrous oxide. Mark in children is 2.6% in oxygen, and in neonates 3.3%. In the elderly, it is 1.48%. So approximately 5% is metabolized in liver and excreted in urine. So its effects in cardiovascular effects generally resembles those of isoflurane. Mildly depresses myocardial contractility. Systemic vascular resistance is reduced, therefore decrease in blood pressure. Cardiac output is well maintained over the normal anesthetic maintenance doses. Sensitization of the myocardium to exogenous catecholamines, as for isoflurane. Less coronary vasodilatation, therefore less coronary steal. There is lower heart rate, which will lead to a decrease in myocardial oxygen demand. So its effects in the respiratory, it's non-irritant to upper respiratory tract, produces dose-dependent ventilatory depression. It relaxes bronchial smooth muscle, but not as effectively as halothane. Cerebral, there is minimal increase in cerebral blood flow and intracranial pressure, decreases cerebral vascular resistance and cerebral metabolic rate. So the intracranial pressure is increased at increasing inspired concentrations. Then in neuromuscular, potentiates non-polarizing muscle relaxants can trigger malignant hyperthermia in susceptible patients. It offers adequate muscle relaxation for intubation of children. So in renal, the inorganic fluoride metabolite is associated with no renal toxicity due to rapid elimination from the body. Renal blood flow is well preserved, associated with impaired renal tubal function. So let's talk about its interaction with carbon dioxide absorbers. So interaction with carbon dioxide absorbers of sevoflurane. Sevoflurane is degraded by alkalis, like soda lime and bar lime, producing a nephrotoxic end product compound F, which is fluoromethyl 2,2 difluoro-1 in bracket trifluoromethyl vinyl ether. In clinical situations, compound A and to a less extent compound B are produced in insignificant in bracket non-toxic amounts. They are theoretically renotoxic. More compound A is produced with dry carbon dioxide absorber at higher temperatures at a decrease in fresh. gas flows. Then not to be used in patients with pre-existing renal disease. So contraindication not to be used in patients of renal disease. Contraindications. We have severe hypovolemia, susceptibility to malignant hyperthermia, intracranial hypertension, pre-existing renal disease. All these contraindications give sevoflurane. Then drug interactions. Potential NMD drugs does not sensitize the heart to catecholamine-induced arrhythmias. Desflurane. So desflurane is a colorless agent stored in amber-colored bottles without preservative, not broken down by soda lime, light, or metals. It is non-flammable. Structure is similar to isoflurane, has a boiling point of 23.5%, 1.5 degrees Celsius, and an increased vapor pressure of 664 millimeters of mercury at 20 degrees Celsius. Cannot be used in standard vaporization. So it uses a special vaporizer which requires electric power to heat. So physical properties. It has an ether-like but less pungent odor than isoflurane. Mark is 6.6% in oxygen and 3% in 60% of nitrous oxide. Mark is 9 to 10% in oxygen in neonates, has moderate potency, low solubility, while its average short duration of action, has a blood-stroke gas partition coefficient of 0.42, almost the same as that of nitrous oxide. So induction in anesthesia is therefore extremely rapid. The battery is long. Respiratory. So respiratory, that's what happens. In cerebral, we have similar to isoflurane, dose dependency of vasodilation to metabolic rate. In renal, there is no evidence of any nephrotoxic effects. In hepatic, no evidence of hepatic injury. So it's contraindicated in severe hypovolemia, malignant hyperthermia, intracranial hypertension. Drug interactions, potentiates non-polarizing NMB drugs, does not sensitize myocardium to arrhythmogenic effects of epinephrine. Emergence associated with delirium in some pediatric patients. What are advantages over other agents? Decreased blood solubility. It is minimally with decreased blood solubility, which offers more precise control of maintenance of anesthesia and rapid recovery. So it's minimally biodegenerable. Some significant drawbacks. Cannot inhalation, induction, causes tachycardia at high concentrations. It requires a special vaporizer and it is expensive. Now, is it the last one? Abandoned in developed countries because of its flammability. So this one is abandoned in developed countries like Uganda. Used widely in underdeveloped countries like America. Colorless, highly volatile liquid. Has a characteristic smell like ethereal. Like the thing is just so ethereal. Flammable in air and explosive in oxygen. composed by air, light, and heat, especially to acetyl air and ether peroxide, should be stored in cool places in opaque containers. Has a high gas solubility coefficients of 12. Highly potent, but induction and recovery are slow. So in the CNS, the classical stages of anesthesia are seen with ether because induction of anesthesia is so slow. Ether stimulates